Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, Alias Guy. We've got some breaking news today. Two pretty big things just happened. The first being that Senator David Richards, who's part of the Liberal end of the Senate, has crossed the floor to the Conservatives. And the NDP have just said they are not voting in favor of the throne speech, which is a confidence vote. We may very well see, cross your fingers, this government fall. God, would that be a blessing just in every way. Now, we're going to deal on a few other things here as well. There's a few updates that's come out. I urge you to share, like, share, and subscribe. This whole senator thing, This is big. This does not happen often. Now, yes, he's an appointee of Trudeau. He's kind of been a thorn in Trudeau's butt for a little while, especially the Liberal side, on a few bills that he's spoken out on. But for the most part, they're whips. They get forced to vote on whatever the majority is pushing them to do. And now, Trudeau has completely destroyed our Senate. And I'm a firm believer that the Senate should have been abolished and replaced with an elected system for true democracy. After all, anybody out west would tell you that the senators that voted for Bill C11 should be kicked out. But we don't have that ability to actually have an election and show and voice the opinions and say, hey, by the way, buddy, that was wrong, punt, and put somebody else in who would actually be a voice for the people. So again, our democratic system is a farce. So, you only get one vote federally, and you only get one vote provincially. It's not true democracy in any means. Now, let's just kind of hit on this, and then we'll do the NDP. And then we're going to get caught up on a whole pile of other things that have kind of been happening, especially with all of the shootings and stuff. It's just, Canada's falling apart. This Liberal government has to fall. We need to get somebody else in there. And right now, the Conservatives are the only way to go, because they're the only chance we have to actually removing the Liberals and start investigating all of these scams. And maybe for the first time in Canadian history, have mass arrests and mass charges and real transparency so the police can do their work and start putting these MPs behind bars where a lot of them deserve to be, as well as exposing all of the interference, the corruption through the Chinese government and the Calistinis and the Laurentian elite, and literally start opening people's eyes up to the reality of what's going on. And the major way to do that, which is one of the best things, and really I think cost the Conservatives the election, was the fact that they're going to cut funding. There will be no more state-funded media. You do it on your own. If people like what you do, they will watch your show. If they don't, well, then they don't. Now, let's get started here. We're just going to read this article put out, and then I'm going to show you a few clips and some of the talking points from some senators that have been just kind of flooding out here through the day. So, Giller Prize-winning author and senator David Richards joins Conservative caucus. So the formerly non-affiliated New Brunswick Senator David Richards has joined the Conservative Senate caucus and will sit with the party in the Red Chamber until his retirement later this year. Richards, a best-selling author and one of only a handful of writers who's received a Governor General's Award in both non-fiction and fiction categories, was appointed to the Senate in 2018 by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I am proud to join the Conservative caucus and be part of a strong team that stands up for Canadians, he said in a statement related to the Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, Senator Leo Hasakos. The party said that since his appointment, Richard has demonstrated a consistent commitment to core Conservative values, including respect for freedom of expression and individual responsibility. We are proud to welcome Senator Richards to a growing Conservative Senate caucus, one that is home to diverse opinions and healthy debate, Hasakos said in a statement. On her way into the Conservative caucus meeting Wednesday, Conservative Senator Denise Batters said she was very excited that Richards had decided to join her team. It's going to be great, she said. At the time of his appointment, Richards said he was sitting as an independent man and that he would make my own decisions to the best of my ability when I'm in the chamber. Richards, who is a co-winner of a 2000 Giller Prize for his novel Mercy Among the Children and has received a number of prestigious awards, including 2 Geminis for script writing, will continue to represent New Brunswick. The senator is an avid hunter who has been outspoken critic on Bill C11, the Liberal government's 2023 gun control legislation. This bill is actually cowardly, in whom it points the finger at and blames, and it still will not solve the problem of violence. I wish it did, but this bill will not stop the gangs. The law, in its own blind way, actually proposes to recruit them, Richards told the Senate in the summer of 2023. Now, like I said, there's a few really good things about this senator. This is going to be very refreshing. Now, let's just kind of hit on X here, because there's been a lot of the senators have been posting kind of what's going on. So, Michael Geist, Senator David Adam Richards tears apart Bill C11, warning against censorship and government dictating what accounts as Canadian culture. Powerful speech from one of Canada's most acclaimed authors, having won Governor General's Award for Fiction and Nonfiction and the Giller Prize. And I did really enjoy this speech. I remember watching it. He put truth to power, and he talks like I do. It's when you read lots, especially when it comes to history, those are usually, that's how I've learnt not to repeat the future, like not to repeat the past. You need to understand your past. You need to understand it fully, and you need to have the freedom to read all spectrums of it. And this man is incredibly well read. Let's take a listen.
One night after my reading at Harbour Fund in Toronto, 2 people approached me. One was the great Irish writer Roddy Doyle, telling me he had long admired my work. The other was the First Nation writer Richard Wegmas, telling me he started writing because he was influenced by my work. Both were very kind, lived thousands of miles apart, one Irish and one First Nation, and the writing had little to do with identity politics, but it did have much to do with identifying. I do not know who would be able to tell me what Canadian content is and what it is not, but I know it won't be in the Minister of Heritage's power to ever tell me. We have yet to make a great movie about hockey, for God's sakes, a great movie about Juno Beach, a great movie about Dieppe, or a movie about the young Canadians fighting to death in Hong Kong. Our ancestors and singers and writers too have gone away because they had to, for too many in power have no knowledge about these things. We have filled the world with our talent, but not because of the Minister of Heritage. We have spread our books and movies across the world, but it is not because of some formula. We have insulted so many of our authors and singers, our actors and painters, by not paying attention to them and then claiming them when they go somewhere else. They come back to get the Order of Canada and to be feted at Rideau Hall. Drake is known worldwide, but not because of the CRTC. Thank God Drake was not up to them, or Leonard Cohen, or Gordon Lightfoot either. You see, we have gone back to the age of Cicero without even knowing. In that age, scapegoating was considered a blessing, and mob action against one person was considered justice. It was Christ, actually, who taught us that scapegoating was a great lie and pleaded with us by his death never to return to that state. This law will be one of scapegoating all those who do not fit into what our bureaucrats think Canada should be. Stalin, again, will be looking over our shoulder when we write. We have come a long way from Cicero. Thank you very much.
God, well worded. Like my thoughts exactly, and I remember him saying this, and I was just blown away because he's absolutely correct. And he could have been even a little bit more in depth on it, but of course, you got to kind of keep your time down. Now, Senator Leo Housakos has wrote, the Honorable Leo Housakos, Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, is pleased to welcome Senator David Richard Adams to the Conservative Senate Caucus. Senator David Wells, a warm welcome to the Conservative team. Senator David Richards, a celebrated Canadian author and a strong voice for New Brunswick, for Canada, and for conservative values. Senator Richards brings sharp insight and a clear voice to the Senate. Proud to have him join both the National Conservative Caucus and the Senate Conservative Caucus. Let's get to work. Hear, hear. Now, we're going to move on to, well, the NDP. Surprise, surprise, they may actually do something democratic for the people. It's yet to be seen, but let's give it a shot.
The second thing I want to announce today is that New Democrats met caucus this morning, and we decided that we are going to be voting no to the throne speech. 1.2 million Canadians sent New Democrats to this Parliament to advocate for working families across this country. And yet, in this throne speech, we don't see those priorities reflected. Millions of Canadians don't have access to an affordable home. They don't have access to timely health care, and they don't have access to the good family-sustaining jobs that they need. And yet the throne speech doesn't even mention the words health care. You won't even find those words in the throne speech. There is no mention of non-market housing, cooperative housing, or housing for Indigenous people, some of the most acute needs in this country when it comes to affordable housing. And it foreshadows $28 billion in cuts that will absolutely hurt working people across this country. So we will be voting no against the throne speech and making sure that the interests of working people across this country are reflected, and we'll continue to fight for those measures that we know that so many millions of Canadians and working families need in this country.
On tariffs.
Just in French.
Of course.
Okay, I'm going to speed ahead and skip all the French.
Retaliatory tariffs. Do you want to see them match the American tariffs on American imports of U.S. steel?
Absolutely. Yeah, New Democrats have, since the beginning of this, have called on a strong, united, countervailing tariff program that is targeted and that will be effective to defend against what are obviously unjustified and unfair tariffs by the United States.
What do you think of the Prime Minister saying this morning he's going to take some time, not a lot of time, but some time to consider retaliatory tariffs, and saying it's because of the intensive conversations they're having with the Americans?
Well, he better be quick because industry and jobs are at stake right now. And frankly, this is not a surprise. I'm a little bit surprised that Prime Minister Carney needs time. These tariffs have been foreshadowed for some time. What we need is not time or not deliberation. We need action.
Ford said that the Prime Minister is being steamrolled by Trump. Do you agree with that sentiment? Do you feel like that the U.S. is bullying the Prime Minister or the Liberal government right now?
Well, I think the entire political strategy of Donald Trump has been to bully everybody. That's not a surprise to anybody. So I don't think Prime Minister Carney is unique in that regard. But, you know, the way to stand up to bullies is to stand up strong and effectively and intelligently and in a timely fashion. And so we need a strong Canadian response. Now, that's why the NDP is calling on 3 concrete measures that can be done right away. Look, in this House of Commons, the Liberals have prioritized a tax cut, and they said that they would get rid of interprovincial trade barriers by Canada Day, yet the word employment insurance does not appear in the throne speech. That is not a worker-centered throne speech, but that's a concrete measure that we need right away to protect workers who are going to be affected by these unfair tariffs. And again, you know, the public-private measures that will encourage Canadian companies to use Canadian-made products like steel and aluminum is something we have to get into action right away.
À quel point le Canada devrait-il augmenter ses tarifs?
And we'll skip past all the verbal crap again.
Tous nos députés vont voter.
If the throne speech fails, are you ready for a potential election, or the Conservatives having the opportunity to try to secure the confidence of the House?
Well, as my colleague just said in French, Canadians don't want an election right now.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We want it. We want it again. We got to get now, especially now that we see in the numbers, we need it. We got to get rid of this government. My God, we got to get rid of this government.
And but the Canadians also sent us here to take principled positions and advocate for the policies we know working people need. So, you know, we have no problem as a New Democrat caucus saying this throne speech just doesn't deliver for Canadians. We're going to vote accordingly.
Does that mean that, you know, it's a confidence vote, obviously? Should we take this as this is not a declaration from you guys that you don't have confidence in the government, or should we take it that way, that you don't have confidence already in the Carney government?
It's a clear message that this throne speech is not a worker-centered throne speech, and it does not deliver the priorities that we heard from millions of Canadians across this country. And so we can't support a throne speech that so badly misses the mark in terms of the economic and social policies that people need in this country. And so we're comfortable with our vote.
I'm gathering you're assuming that there's going to be enough votes to pass the throne speech. Otherwise, an election could be triggered. So is that a danger you're concerned about?
Well, in a minority parliament, you're always concerned about the impacts of our votes, but we're taking a principled approach. We've scanned the throne speech very carefully from cover to cover, and it's frankly, it's a conservative light throne speech. It's not a throne speech that reflects the priorities of New Democrats or the working Canadians that we represent. And so, we're taking the principled position on the throne speech, and we'll see what the other parties do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, conservative my butt it is. What a joke. Okay, anyways. Bank of Canada.
Staying with Canada's economy, some breaking news closely connected to the uncertainty around the U.S. tariffs. Canada's central bank is holding its key interest rate steady at 2.75%. Here's Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem making that announcement last hour.
At this decision, there was a clear consensus to hold the policy rate unchanged as we gain more information. We also discussed the path ahead for the policy interest rate. Here, there was more diversity of views. On balance, members thought there could be a need for a reduction in the policy rate if the economy weakens in the face of continued U.S. tariffs and uncertainty, and cost pressures on inflation are contained.
And Scott Peterson is on this story for us. Okay, so Scott, in light, of course, of the newly imposed U.S. tariffs, tell us more about why the bank made this decision.
Well, they're trying to adopt a wait-and-see attitude. They're not able to see as far into the future as they would like. And Tiff Macklem famously said that they are not as forward-looking as usual. And this is just the uncertainty of the tariffs. Are they being imposed? Are they being retracted? And this is causing a real disruption in the economy. However, the bank needs hard facts before they make a decision, and that's why they remained at 2.75. The first quarter was actually stronger than the bank was expecting. We saw a lot of exports into the U.S. with a lot of companies trying to skirt around the tariff deadline. We also saw inflation was up higher, the GDP numbers were up higher, but the governor was clear to say that there is
that GDP is bullcrap, by the way. That little boost that the Liberals have been using, that's all because of pre-purchase. That's from major markets that we knew when the tariffs were coming in place and bulk buy. So they bulk buy at a lower rate, and now those stocks are depleting. So we are going to see a huge drop in that GDP. And I'm sure Tiff knows about this, but mainstream won't talk about it because that goes against their job, that goes against their paycheck, is to actually tell the truth so that people know, holy crap, we've got to get another government in.
Looming uncertainty going into the second quarter, the third quarter. Are we going to see business investment pulling back? We are already seeing unemployment rising to 6.9%, and that business investment is key here. Who is going to invest in Canada with all this uncertainty? And there's that cliche that business likes to have the uncertainty before they're investing money. Now, today, the Bank of Canada governor did pause. This is after 7 rate reductions from this time last year. So we're at 2.75%. And there's a lot of economists believing that we're going to see another couple of rate reductions before the end of the year. We're already seeing a 57% chance, with market makers believing we're going to see a rate cut as soon as July 30th. So just because he's not cutting today doesn't mean he's not concerned about the slowdown that we are expected to see in the second quarter and the third quarter when the reality of these tariffs really hit up. Right now, it's just sort of projection.
These guys, he has no idea what he's talking about. Anyways, we're going to move on. So here's an update.
Police in Toronto are searching for multiple suspects after a deadly shooting last night. 1 man was killed and 5 others were wounded in the gunfire in a residential neighborhood. The CBC's Clara Pasica is at the scene with the latest.
This is still an active crime scene. As you can see, this police tape still up. Police were called here at around 8:30 last night with reports of a shooting. Residents that we're speaking to saying they heard many gunshots, and we, from our vantage point, have spotted at least 88 evidence markers just from where we're standing here. A man is dead from this shooting. We did speak with the local councillor for this area, Mike Cole. He said he knew the victim.
He was a longtime resident. The tragedy is that he was wheelchair bound. I mean, the disgusting shooting of a man in a wheelchair, no matter what, it just shows how totally disgusting this whole thing is. There was about 25 shots fired. There was a mad scramble by some of the intended victims to get away. There was a number of people that were hit by bullets. Thankfully, none of them are in life-threatening situations. They were, brought to local hospitals.
We did see police removing a wheelchair from this scene this morning. We do know that there are 5 other people who were taken to hospital in non-life-threatening condition. The victims range in age here from 18 to 40.
The CBC's Claire Pasica in Toronto.
Crazy. And now the Toronto police actually had a presser about it.
I can ask you the same thing about that. You feel actually this was a targeted shooting and it's a gang related?
So what I can say is we do believe that it's targeted. In terms of it being gang related, we're absolutely investigating every possibility. We're within 24 hours of the shooting having occurred, so we're looking at every avenue.
And I was going to ask you, was the victim in a wheelchair?
He was.
Do we know how many shots were fired last night and how many guns were used?
So there were multiple guns used. I won't speak to the specific number as that forms part of the investigation. Similarly, I won't speak to the specific number of casings that we found, but I can say that there were multiple rounds.
Was this connected to top 5 or rapper?
Why can't they say it, the amount of shots? Like, that's just these. No wonder so many Canadians have lost respect in the police and RCMP. Like, what is the amount? I can understand holding back the caliber, but what is the amount of shells being released got to do with anything? God, just.
Previously accused of murder. There's video on social media circulating of him cutting off his ankle bracelet, and other speculation that he had some kind of involvement in the shooting last night.
So what I'll say is we're early in the investigation. I can't speak to specifically whether or not he's involved. With regard to the ankle bracelet, Mr. Ali was well within his right to not be wearing that ankle bracelet. He wasn't on any conditions to wear it. So him having cut that off on social media was sort of part of, I guess, his information that he wanted to put out, part of his persona perhaps, but he wasn't actually required to have that bracelet on.
Are you concerned about that retaliation?
Pardon me?
Are you concerned about retaliation?
So, I mean, we're always going to be concerned about what could potentially arise from a shooting. As I mentioned, we're investigating every possible avenue. So we're certainly taking precautions across the city to make sure that we have heightened presence in various areas of the city to ensure that we have that increased safety.
Were the 5 people that were caught in the gunfire victims?
So what I can say is anyone who's going to be losing their life doesn't deserve to lose their life. So I guess depending on what your definition of innocent is, regardless of what anyone's involved in, they don't deserve to lose their life. So everybody who was involved, and certainly the person who lost their life, did not deserve that life.
Okay, so now there's some charges have finally been laid with the Piper Arms pub mass shooting that happened here a few months ago. This is outrageous, and I'm going to show you some footage once we're done here.
The Toronto Police Service has arrested 10 men in connection with a series of violent incidences that occurred across the GTA, and 1 man remains outstanding. These incidents include a mass shooting at a pub in Scarborough on Friday, March 7th, 2025. That night, 3 suspects entered the pub and opened fire inside. 9 people were shot and other people were injured as a result. No one was killed, which is truly a miracle. But the effects of this mass shooting remain devastating for the victims and for the sense of safety in our communities. The indiscriminate nature of this gun violence is hard to comprehend. I'm going to show you the surveillance footage that captures what transpired on March 7th at the pub. And a warning, this footage is graphic and may be disturbing for many to see. In total, for this incident and other incidents, investigators have laid 203 charges against 11 people, including 24 counts of attempt murder. Before I pass it over to Superintendent McIntyre of Organized Crime Enforcement, who will provide further details, I want to thank all of our members who have worked tirelessly on this case. The announcement today is the result of meticulous investigation. It is diligent police work, chasing down leads, knocking on doors, talking to witnesses. I'm incredibly proud of our members for their determination and tenacity to bring dangerous suspects to justice and to prevent further harm. I also want to thank policing partners who provided support, including the Center for Forensic Sciences, Durham Regional Police, Halton Regional Police, Brantford Police Service, and York Regional Police. In these investigations, we were able to help the Brantford Police, Durham Police, and the York Regional Police with some of their outstanding occurrences as well. So, when we think of these investigations, they truly underline the importance of collaboration and this type of work.
Okay, so
the Toronto
let's see the footage, right? Like, enough of this crap. So here it is, ladies and gentlemen. Here's some of the footage. So 3 suspects entered the pub. You can see there were people in the entranceway. They already started open fire. This is horrific. So this is right inside the pub. This is on March 4th. 3 suspects fired at a victim. These are all interlinked. You can see somebody's hiding behind the car. Later that night on March 4th, suspects went in and a man was washing his car. Now this is what they were getting at. This is tow truck related. These people are hired by tow truck companies to go out and get rid of the competition. And this is all done because of the way that the licensing system and everything is set up. Our government is they purposely do things. It's kind of like how on a previous episode I was talking about like the cigarette tax. By doing these just completely ignorant tax types of programs and all of these regulations, you create a market, a black market. This is why you need freedom. Freedom removes all of this. And, well, in my personal opinion, so does concealed carry. This happens because there's manipulation from the government, and in order for one company to control it, they literally have to harm, threaten, or try to hold ransom on other companies. This has been going on for like a long time, and it's escalated in the last 7 years. Who's been in power for the last 7 years federally, changing all of the rules and regulations? Interesting. Got to think about that one. Anyways, moving on. Now, this is a little wee network. It's called Castanet. I use these people every now and then. These guys are awesome. They're based out of BC. So make sure you like, follow, and share them. if you're in BC. They do a great job for a little wee outlet, and they've been growing. So I'm going to help them grow. And I, like on all previous episodes, I like to promote good, independent, unbought, unstate funded media to get the truth out there. This happened.
2 bodies have been pulled out of Okonogan Lake in just the past few days. Vernon RCMP confirmed a woman's body was pulled from Okonogan Lake on Saturday, May 31st, near the Evely wreck site on West Side Road. Police say a woman was missing, last seen swimming with her kayak the day before, and had not been seen since. Officers found the woman's body in the water at about 12:30 p.m. Police say she was not wearing a life jacket. On Monday, a body off the shores of Kelowna City Park was removed from Okonogan Lake. Police say the incident has no suspected criminality involved. However, they are not releasing any other details. The Kelowna RCMP is reminding all residents and visitors to prioritize water safety.
Never swim alone. Always swim with a buddy. Life jackets are absolutely important for your safety, for our children's safety, and obviously alcohol and the water do not mix. Nothing good will come of it, and we're asking people to just take all those extra precautions.
For Castanet News.
So yeah, that's quite sad. Very sad. Now, this is the Ledrew show. He's actually old school liberal, but he does great interviews. Like, just fabulous interviews. So another person, if you're interested in politics, this is another great guy that you can support. We need all the help we can get, right? So like, share, and subscribe. And if you can, donate. I make no money off of this. I just started. Yes, I've been growing at a record pace, which is kind of a good thing. But it's going to take me like tens of thousands before I can even start to make pennies on what I do. So this costs me. I'm always, urging you to like, share, and subscribe. But I know you're in Canada, and there's not a lot of money to go around. But if you can donate, hey man, every little bit helps. My Gmail is in my page. It's CanadianCitizenJournal@gmail.com. Now let's just take a close listen. And Ledrew, he's great. This guy's great.
He has come on the scene so quickly. Most people don't know anything about him or his past. Yeah, he was a governor, banker. But he has some comments on Canadian, like for instance, the truckers.
Yeah, so he actually wrote an op-ed in the Globe and Mail while the Freedom Convoy protest was going on, referring to the protesters, the overwhelming majority of whom were peacefully protesting, expressing their right to protest on Parliament Hill, as seditious. And we don't know if he was involved in these discussions, but we know that the government later invoked the Emergencies Act and froze bank accounts of people who were peacefully protesting. That was found to be unconstitutional by a judge of the federal court. And we know Mark Carney would have been on board with that invocation.
And did your foundation take that case?
Yes, we brought that to the federal court, and we are awaiting the result of the government's appeal to the Federal Court of Appeal.
So, and he also, talks about net zero. I mean, he's quite high-handed about the economy and the carbon tax.
Yeah, well, we saw in the First Minister's meeting actually just yesterday that when he was talking about energy projects to fast track, which sounds great, but when you get into the fine print, he made it clear the federal government will only fast track projects that meets its environmental consultations, Indigenous consultations, which may be a problem for provincial jurisdiction, by the way.
Yes. But that's what parliamentarians are supposed to know, the difference between provincial and federal.
Right.
Now, our past Prime Minister, Trudeau, knew nothing about that.
No.
He knew nothing about banking, didn't know anything about the law or government, some would say. But this one, we are in a different situation because he was never taught.
No.
So do you feel that there's going to be some challenges coming up where your federation gets in there and says, hey, buddy?
Well, absolutely. So the CCF was also involved in the impact on the No More Pipelines bill challenge, where the Supreme Court actually said the federal government had gone too far.
Yeah.
So it looks like Mark Carney is heading down that track, in which case we'll absolutely challenge it on division of powers grounds. And we'll see how he is on other civil liberties.
Well, that's important. But the other thing is, when you're dealing with government and he's trying to fast track things, Trudeau had a committee. It spent $98 million to fast track things, didn't fast track one thing.
No, because
are you optimistic?
Optimistic about Carney? I wouldn't say so, no.
But we have to give him the benefit of the doubt, though.
I mean, I think he's more competent. I think he's going to be more effective. I think he's more cognitively, effective than Justin Trudeau, but he has some very illiberal instincts.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I've read his book Values, unfortunately, and he doesn't really believe in a free market. He believes in a free market as approved by Mark Carney.
He does have a bit of a control problem, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Okay, well then we're going to have you back when we have some more.
And yes, he does have a control problem. Yeah, this man is a psychopath. He's. If you have read his book, which I don't suggest you buy it, don't give him the money. You can find lots of the actual clips and everything online. Do it that way. Don't give him the benefit of the doubt of having a #1 book because he doesn't deserve it. It's horrible. He is a full-fledged fascist. This man is beyond compare. Just beyond the pale. Embarrassing. Now, this is really interesting. I'm going to play this first, and then I'm going to read to you what the Bureau, the infamous, the one, the only, great, I mean, absolutely fabulous investigative journalist in Canada, Sam Cooper, wrote about it.
The breaking news out of Michigan. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening, Leland. Yeah, the U.S. Attorney in Michigan is calling this the gravest national security concern. You have a Chinese national, a woman who's getting her postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Michigan. Her name is Young King Jian. This is the indictment that you see right here. Her boyfriend comes to visit, lands into Detroit, nonstop flight from Shanghai. They think there's something up with him, Customs and Border Patrol. They start searching him. He says he doesn't have anything. They ask him multiple times. And in his backpack, they find a killer fungus, something known as a terrorism weapon, something capable of taking out billions of dollars in livestock and crops and making people very, very sick. He later admits that he was taking this fungus to his girlfriend, to his Chinese girlfriend, who is doing her postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Michigan. The feds start digging through their cell phones, all of the apps that they have, the Chinese apps that they've been using to communicate, where it's all crystal clear. They had planned this out, that he was going to bring the fungus from China into Detroit and then to the University of Michigan. They figured it all out, the feds, thankfully. They are now charged with a number of things: conspiracy, smuggling, making false statements, also visa fraud, because the boyfriend was coming in on a tourism visa. Leland?
Yeah, and absolutely nobody believes she's just a postdoc fellow studying biofungus and whatever else at the University of Michigan. Brian, this follows up on some incredible reporting you did about a Chinese company that bought a massive amount of land and wanted to build a big factory up in northern Michigan. Are you seeing now a difference in how law enforcement and how communities are treating the Chinese coming in and trying to, use Trojan horses almost?
Well, I think it's interesting that this happened in July of last year, and the charges just came now. Why it took so long? Did it take the Trump administration to come in and push these charges? We don't know, but it took almost a year. And you made a good point about her not just being a postdoctoral fellow. I was going through the indictment, Leland. She received money from the CCP. She received research money from the CCP. She had to sign off on a form saying that she adhered to the 4 basic principles of the Communist Party of China, had to express love for the motherland, not smear the motherland. This is the woman who is now working at the University of Michigan.
Yeah, it puts Trump's ban on Chinese students and ban on anyone with ties to the CCP in a whole new light. Brian Enton, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, this is Sam Cooper. If you don't know who he is and you just started watching and subscribing, I'm a huge fan. I'm on his email list galore, #1 tag. I get all of his information. I have terabytes upon terabytes of information of my own, as well as terabytes and terabytes from him and a lot of other great investigative journalists. This guy is so far ahead of 99.99% of all of the journalists in Canada that he's like the Nostradamus of Canadian journalism. He's been nailing stuff and bringing stuff to light for years. And mainstream has literally blacklisted him because he's so good at his job. And slowly, stuff starts to actually happen because what he is bringing forward is so explosive. Like the Chinese interference in the Liberal Party, just to name one of hundreds of different things that he's brought up, including the drugs at the borders and super labs and money laundering and just it's endless. I don't think this guy sleeps. He's amazing. But anyways, I want to read you his article on this because it's crucial. Like I said, he's the Nostradamus, and the way that he pieces things together because of his vast knowledge of being just digging and doing so much research and having ties to sources within the Alphabet Squad down in the States, which would be the CIA, right, and all the rest of them. So this is what he wrote. Exclusive analysis, Chinese couple smuggled agro-terrorism weapon fungus into U.S. echoing Winnipeg lab Ebola espionage case. So he kind of goes off about what we have just kind of watched. So I'm going to kind of skip through a lot of this, right? So it was not the couple's first illicit border crossing with biological materials. The case underscores a broader pattern: repeated clandestine transfers of biohazards across North American borders, visa fraud by Chinese students accessing elite laboratories, loyalty pledges to the Chinese Communist Party by researchers, and the strategic use of Chinese military-linked research grants. All elements shared with the notorious Winnipeg case, which the government... And this is another reason, like people who voted Liberal, and if I have new subscribers who did vote Liberal, I'm glad you're here. I hope you, I hope you start to see the light, and I get to expose how mainstream is lying to you. This Winnipeg lab, the government has hid so much, and its ties to the Wuhan outbreak. Canada, we need to see this, but there are major organizations within different countries' governments, especially in the USA, who have a deep belief and are still trying to find the rest of the information on how it even became possible for them to do this. But the two that were smuggling stuff out of Winnipeg were linked directly to the Wuhan Institute. And all of this happened within a year or so before the outbreak. Canada, this is one of the reasons that the world really took a few steps back from Canada, because we may very well have been involved. And I don't like to say we, because as a Canadian, we didn't have a choice. Well, the minority, I guess, of us didn't have a choice, because we've been trying to expose this government for the corrupt just evils that they are. But the Liberals could very well have been involved. Now, call it what you want. Maybe they didn't know, but their incompetence has been proven that it could very well have been involved in a global event with what happened at the Wuhan Institute. At Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory, researchers Dr. Zhang Gui and her husband, Qiding Cheng, recently collaborated for years with China's top bioware institutions, including the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the Academy of Military Medical Sciences. In 2019, Gui and Cheng coordinated the unauthorized export of live Ebola and Hennepin virus samples from Winnipeg to Wuhan. Canadian intelligence documents indicate that Qiding Cheng pledged loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party, while Dr. Qi was recruited as a key collaborator on the Wuhan lab's bat flivirus project, which multiple Western intelligence agencies now assess resulted in an accidental lab leak that caused the Wuhan 19 pandemic. Are you getting this? Mainstream will not tell you the truth. That's why I started this channel. This is all fact, people. This is all proven. There are documents, everything. And then the government has hidden and redacted so much that there'll be no justice done. This could very well implicate and put MPs behind bars. We need this government to fall. We need accountability. We have to do this in order for us to move forward. Oh man, it's so frustrating on how deeply embedded the Liberal Party is to the CCP. And, well, their policies tell you a lot because they're fascist policies. The FBI's newly unsealed agroterrorism case also details coordinated lab penetration involving facilities in Texas, Michigan, and the Zhejiang University in China, dating back to at least 2022. In July of 2024, Liu arrived in Detroit on a tourist visa while carrying several undeclared samples of the fungus in violation of U.S. import restrictions, according to his sworn affidavit. Since August 2022, Jian evidently operated under Chinese Communist Party direction, had also worked at the University of Texas, where her research focused specifically on Fusarium germanium. According to the FBI affidavit, her work at both the Texas Institution and the University of Michigan was funded by the Chinese government. Files recovered from Jean's phone included a signed annual self-assessment form dated January 2024 from Zhejiang University, in which she outlined her research accomplishments and affirmed her loyalty to the principles of the CCP. Electronic evidence also shows that Jian has been involved in smuggling packages of biological material into the United States on prior occasions, the indictment alleges. The allegation of Chinese funding and bonds of loyalty are critical to the case. Radio Free Asia has previously reported that many thousands of Chinese students studying abroad on government-backed scholarships are required to sign such forms as part of their continued funding. Again, it goes on and on, but this is like, this should be, well, is mainstream talking about it? Make sure you like, share, and subscribe and get the word out. And they're still silent about what happened with the lab in Manitoba. This needs to come out. We need to expose this. Now, the last story. The housing bubble in Canada is huge. And it's about to burst. And there'll be tax dollars used to, well, create socialist housing that may offset this from occurring sooner than later. But all it's doing is exasperating it, and it's going to be worse. Another reason this government has to fall. We have a major problem in Canada with our housing. Most of it is caused by overspending from the federal government, which has caused inflation, in which, in cahoots, the Bank of Canada has been suppressing interest rates to try and hold back as much as they can on the recession we've been in for the last 5 years. We are actually in a depression, but tax dollars and spending has been hiding that fact. But you're seeing it every time you go to buy groceries. Your wages have not gone up. And a lot of people misconstrue the fact that, interest rates are only at 2% still. No. This is a cumulative when they say that. It's 2% on 2% on 2% on 2%. This is the truth, and the media doesn't clarify. We have seen a huge marginal increase in inflation. 20-some% increase compared to the stagnant dollar of our wages. Add that to Oh my God. The falling value of our currency. The peso we are now at. In other words, your worth has dropped dramatically, just like a depression. We are not in a recession anymore. We are in a fake recession. And the government wants to spend another $500 billion to try to fake their way through this. And when the next government comes in and goes to reset and correct this, if it's not done properly, we're gonna hurt. And believe it or not, the conservative, small c, small l, because they're not a real true conservative party. They're actually closer aligned to what the Liberals were 15 to 40 years ago, 35 years ago. They actually have policies that could give us a soft landing. Like the attrition. Not firing people like Carney just keeps doing. So all of you Liberals out there, you know, who voted because you were brainwashed by propaganda that the Conservatives were going to come in and just start firing people, they never said that. They were going to try and soft land us out of this socialist, this reign of terror that has been in control of Canada for a decade. They wanted to just not rehire as people retired. They wanted to cut all of the consulting costs. Every dollar saved gives them a dollar that they can reinvest. This is how a household and a business does things. You can't spend your way out of debt. It doesn't work. And Carney is going to make hundreds of millions of dollars for himself and his shareholders and this green zealot cabal on the backs of Canadians. Now let's just take a listen to this housing market.
Welcome back. Spring is typically a busy season for housing markets, including the market right here in Toronto. But our next guest says for the fourth consecutive month, sales of detached homes are at their lowest level in this city in 30 years. That's aside from the COVID lockdown period. And condo sales are at their lowest level in 20 years. Let's bring in John Pasalis. He's president of Realosophy Realty. John, thanks a lot for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
What's going on in the Toronto housing market?
The spring market is officially dead on arrival, unfortunately. Very sluggish sales. As I said, as you introduced, we've been seeing this for the past few months. And really, this is not a real estate story. It's a story about the broader economy, economic conditions worsening, and more importantly, people worried about their job losses. No one's rushing out to buy a home if they're worried they're going to lose their job, and many buyers are just moving to the sidelines right now.
What's this tell us? This tells us that participants or potential participants in the real estate market read the headlines. They're aware of economic conditions. They're aware of what's going on in the world.
They do, absolutely. They read the headlines and they see what's going on south of the border. And of course, the biggest negative side effect of what we're seeing from the U.S. administration is the uncertainty. It is just not knowing what's going to come next, what tariffs will drop next, and how that might impact a particular household's income.
Do you see any shifts in sentiment as the headlines from Washington change? As we know, Donald Trump has reversed himself or partially reversed himself several times.
I mean, that's the challenge. They keep reversing and going back and forth, and I think this is leading to the uncertainty. So I don't see this really much of a change in the housing market anytime soon. I think we need to see things stabilize. We need to see some green shoots coming out of the economy, some stability, and things calming down in terms of the rhetoric south of the border.
So what does this mean to prices when the market more or less freezes up and sales almost evaporate?
So prices are actually down about 6-7% year over year, but this is largely because we saw a slight rally last spring. If we look at prices over the past 9 months, for houses and condos, they've been relatively stable. And this is largely because sellers are stubborn. Home prices can shoot up 20% in a short period of time, but they tend to be sticky on the way down. So sellers are holding out So we're not seeing a ton of downward pressure on prices yet.
What happens in the case of somebody who must sell? They've got a situation, a family situation, a work situation in which they simply must sell their home.
I think that's the one risk, and especially if we start to see more job losses in the months ahead, that is one thing that could trigger some sellers needing to sell, reducing their prices. And of course, we don't need a ton of sellers to do that. Once a handful of sellers start dropping their prices, they now set the market.
Right. Let's talk about the condo market. There seems to be all kinds of negative headlines on the condo market. Is this a good time to buy a condo?
That's a great question. I mean, listen, the market is sluggish. If you're buying a larger unit, I'd say the market is more stable. Condos in the 900 to 1,000 square feet that target end users, we're seeing a lot more stability. The micro condos.
So what does stability mean?
They're just moving more quickly. We're not seeing as much downward pressure on prices. The small condos is the market that is the most sluggish. Those are really investor driven and have a ton of inventory and very few showings.
Right, and so are not selling.
They're not exactly. Those are the ones that aren't moving.
And what is happening to prices in that segment?
We're starting to see a little bit of dip in prices. We got not significant, not meaningful. We're not seeing 10% year-over-year declines yet. We're seeing a bit of stability still.
So to rephrase my question, is this a good time for, let's say, a young person or a young couple getting into the real estate market for the first time to buy a smallish condo?
I would be cautious if you're buying a small condo. I think I'd have less concerns if you're buying a larger unit. I think you need to be mindful of the building you're buying in. Mm-hmm. A lot of these buildings that were targeted to investors that have hundreds of micro condos probably are not going to be the best investment. If you're buying in a boutique building, probably a little bit safer.
Right. So your concern would be that young couple or person could buy a small condo and see its value
decline.
Decrease.
Exactly, because we're seeing a lot of risk over the next 6 months or so.
Okay, let's pivot to the big national story and Mark Carney's pledge to get the government back into the business of building homes. We ran pieces yesterday about prefabricated homes being made in New Brunswick. He is pledging to build homes at a pace not seen in many, many decades. What are some of the challenges do you think he will face, and can he succeed in meaningfully increasing housing supply in this country?
I mean, it's yet to be seen. Certainly not at the pace that they're suggesting. And I think one of the government's big goals is to prioritize non-market housing. So that is either not-for-profits or government subsidized, which of course is important. That is a segment that governments have largely ignored since the early 90s. I think that's a great goal. It doesn't help solve the housing affordability crisis if someone wants to buy, a home that they're going to own or occupy. So while it's positive on the one side, it's not necessarily going to help people who want to buy a home of their own.
John,
now, they don't really dig deep enough to explain in its entirety. He's using this whole tariff thing with Trump. Yes, that has something to do with it. But what they're not talking about is that we have seen an acceleration and separation in who is buying homes. And this is kind of a shadow part of what's created the explosive part of this bubble, why it is completely blown up the way that it has in the last 5 or 6 years. Now, these immigrants come in, they get subsidized, and they get checks. They actually make more money than any Canadian born in Canada gets. It's like a starter thing. So now you have this massive influx of all of these immigrants who have come in, who have applied and are being processed to be citizens in Canada that have free money, your tax dollars. They're using that money and they're buying real estate. So this number has skyrocketed. As normal everyday Canadians, they can't afford it. We don't get no subsidies. In fact, it's the opposite. Our taxes have gone up, which reduces the amount of money that we have to be able to buy a house. This also falls into the job spectrum. Immigrants are going and getting jobs that the employers would prefer to pay the immigrant because they get a kickback from the government. So they can pay the immigrant a little bit less and the government gives them money, which I've exposed on previous episodes. Now, this immigration purchasing boom, on top of the bubble that we've already had, with the drop in our value of dollar, the companies that have, and this is before Trump, companies have been going bankrupt and fleeing Canada. We have been losing jobs at record levels, and the government has been hiring, backdoor hiring, more government employees to offset the numbers, and then lying with their stats. Anybody can lie with stats. Stats is stats. Math doesn't lie, politicians do. And media. Well, what happens when we hit a critical point? And all of a sudden, especially in the 3 years where we saw immigration hit record levels, fall off of those subsidies, are they going to be able to afford to pay for those homes? All of a sudden, you've got mass foreclosures, which we're already starting to see on regular Canadians. So now you're seeing the regular Canadians who have either lost their job or literally cannot afford to pay their mortgages because they're still deciding between heat and eat. Something's got to give, and we're seeing that, and it's worrying. It's very stressful to a lot of the economists who are seeing this from the top down. And again, mainstream isn't talking about this. Now, we're on a huge curvature with that market. And it's backed by another failing market, which is the immigrant purchase value. Once that subsidized immigration subsidies fall off, add that to the inflation being held back by overspending, Canada is in big trouble. And our GDP has done nothing for 10 years. And Carney's going to keep pushing the more decarbonization where no projects of any value to the people are going to be built. Instead, it's going to be concentrated to the elite. Do you see where this is going? Canada's in big trouble. Big trouble. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have, please make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. And if you are, please punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Check out my merch. I still haven't brought out the new lineup yet. I'm having a little bit of difficulty on some of the software. I thought I had it figured out, but some of my stuff might just be a little bit too elaborate for kind of what I'm after. But we're working with it. I'm working with the actual clothing designers, and we're trying to work it all out. We're excited. Can't wait for it to go. Until then, we've got a few items that are out there right now. Ooh, pretty cool stuff. Definitely very nice, good quality clothing. Until the next time. You've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, Alias the Guy. Stay informed.